Here's the recap of the first season of Tokyo Vice. In 1999, a young guy named Jake Edelstein travels to Tokyo. In his homeland, he graduated from university and for family reasons decided to leave the country. The protagonist settles in a small apartment and spends all day long preparing for the entrance exam for the position of criminal journalist in a local newspaper called Mako. Eventually, he manages to pass it, and the management of the company hires a foreigner for the first time in its history. The editor-in-chief is not happy about it and prevents Jake from working in every possible way. But his direct supervisor Imai and a few of his colleagues help the protagonist to join the team. Turns out it's not easy to write about crime in Japan. When someone dies, the police write it off as an accident or self-immolation. If you try to ask questions or dig deeper, your bosses will stop you, as the police forbid publishing information that goes against their opinion. Jake is sent to gather data on a recently deceased man. Although he has multiple stab wounds, the police say he committed self-immolation. The protagonist, still ignorant of the rules of this city, begins to dig deeper and learns that the deceased had large debts, and he owed to the organization whose logo Jake saw on the envelope. Also, in a few days, the guy witnesses an elderly man in the middle of the street setting himself on fire. The protagonist finds the matches of the deceased, and on them also finds the same logo. He begins to guess that this company is involved in the deaths, but when he goes to their address, he finds nothing. The main character contacts Detective Jin and asks for help in his investigation, but he is not going to help him, but only leads him around by the nose. So Jake finds himself in a nightclub where young girls help wealthy men to have a good time. The protagonist gets acquainted with Samantha, who came here from America to earn money. There is sympathy between them, and the guy notices a Japanese man who looks at him askew. It turns out to be Sato, and he is a Yakuza who is secretly in love with Samantha. However, the fearless Jake meets him, and they become buddies. A few days later, the newspaper demands from Jake an article on a given topic, and the protagonist again goes to Detective Jin. The man gives him false information, because of which Jake is almost fired from his job. Later, the protagonist manages to get a little revenge on the detective, after which they begin to dislike each other. The newspaper gives Jake the last chance to prove himself, otherwise he will be fired. He accidentally finds himself at the scene of the crime before everyone else and witnesses the tough detective Katajiri calming down the Yakuza by simply saying something in his ear. Jake is noticed, and Katajiri asks him not to write about the incident in the newspaper. The next day, the protagonist visits the detective and asks him to help him get an exclusive in return for a favor. He agrees, but before telling how things are now in the world of Yakuza. It turns out that Tozawa and his men have recently arrived in Tokyo and are aggressively taking over the territories belonging to Chiharakai, who do not want war in the future. So that you do not get confused in the names, I will label them as evil Yakuza and good Yakuza. The detective himself also doesn't want war between the clans and is trying to stop Tozawa. They go to them to arrest several members of their clan for yesterday's incident, which was witnessed by the protagonist. Everything goes well, and Jake gets his exclusive. At this time, Sato, a Yakuza with whom the protagonist met at the club, sees the guy on TV. It turns out Sato works for Chiharakai, and he had an idea on how they could use the protagonist for their clan's purposes. Jake tells Detective Katajiri about the 2 deaths due to debt and the strange company, but loaned them money. It turns out that Katajiri knows about these cases, but can't prove anything. So he gives all the collected evidence to the protagonist and asks him to investigate the case on his own. Soon Jake is grabbed by the Yakuza and taken to Chiharakai. Their leader Ishida asks Jake for a favor. Since he has ties to Katagiri, who is considered the most incorruptible detective in Tokyo, the Yakuza asks the guy to find a mole in his clan of their enemy Tozawa. Jake tells Katajiri about it, and he soon discovers the traitor, who later jumps off the roof in shame. Meanwhile, the protagonist asks his supervisor Imai and co-workers to help him investigate those 2 deaths in a strange loan company. They learn that this company keeps changing its location, but eventually find their office. Emi pretends to be a customer and gets a copy of the contract. The protagonists realize that the company is driving debtors to self-immolation with constant threats. But how can this be profitable? Soon they do guess. It's all about the insurance, which they take from the family of the victims. However, Jake's investigation comes to a dead end, since the company is run by a frontman. The protagonist goes for help to Shiharakai, who remain indebted to him for help in catching the traitor. The clan leader gives him a tip and the guy finds the company that runs all these credit frauds. Jake meets their director and tells him that he knows everything. That's why it will be better for everyone if he gives up the Yakuza who are behind it all. Of course, they turn out to be the Tozawa clan, and the director promises to hand over all the documents he has in the evening. However, by the end of the day, Jake finds the director dead. We learn that Samantha has not wasted time and has accumulated enough money to open her own club, where she wants to lure girls from their current place of work. This becomes known and the owner of the club decides to scare the protagonist by putting Sato on her, who protects his club. However, the Yakuza confesses his feelings to Samantha and they sleep together. After a while, Sato beats up his colleague for calling Samantha names, and the guy holds a grudge against him. Soon Tozawa's men attack the Shiharakai clan and almost kill their leader, but Sato manages to save his boss, for which he is promoted. Meanwhile, Samantha is invited to a private dinner by one of her clients, and it turns out to be a private detective. We learn that Samantha was formerly a missionary in Tokyo, but soon fell so in love with the city that she decided to stay. She stole a large sum of money from a church and disappeared without a trace. And now a private detective has found her. However, he is in no hurry to tell his employers about her. He wants the girl to sleep with him in return for his silence and gives her time to think. Samantha asks Sato for help. He visits the private detective, but things don't go according to plan and a Yakuza kills the man. The clans of Tokyo come together for a meeting where they all speak out against Tozawa's aggressive behavior against the Shiharakai clan. They humiliate the man in public. But it turns out that Tozawa's leader, who agreed to his ward's punishment, was the mastermind behind the aggressive takeover of Tokyo. Soon the Shiharakai leader informs Jake that they have learned how Tozawa's men are delivering illegal substances to Tokyo. He shares this information for free, because if he leaks it to the cops, everyone will benefit. At first, the protagonist goes to Katajiri, but he is not in a hurry to send special forces there, believing that it is necessary to do everything right and then they will manage to arrest Tozawa himself. But there is a chance that there will be no more such a good chance. So the protagonist informs Detective Jin about it. However, when the police arrive at the scene, they find no illegal substances. Because of this, the cops are now unwilling to cooperate with Jake. Even Katajiri now does not communicate with the protagonist. We learn that Detective Jin is actually working for Tozawa, and he is the one who managed to warn his boss. Katajiri begins to guess that there is a snitch in their department and decides to set a trap for the mole. He leaks that he has gathered enough evidence to put Tozawa in jail. The Yakuza leader forces Jin to check what evidence the detective has found, and the man sneaks into the basement at night, where all the documents are kept. Just at that moment, Katajiri observes the infiltration by camera and exposes the mole. The next day, Jin meets with Katajiri and thinks that he will give him up, but it turns out the old detective thinks Jin is a good cop, who simply made a mistake. Now to make amends, he must help arrest Tozawa. According to the plan, Jin must convince the Yakuza to go with him to the place of transfer of illegal substances. However, things don't go according to plan and Tozawa realizes the betrayal. Jin is likely to be killed. Tozawa then meets with Detective Katajiri and threatens to kill his entire family if he doesn't stop digging for him. Meanwhile, Samantha learns that her best friend Polina has been kidnapped. It turns out that she owes a lot of money to the club where she was having fun with her boyfriend. Samantha asks Sato for help and they go to the club. There they learn that Polina has been sent somewhere where she will have to work off the debt with her body. However, Sato can't help anymore, as further actions on his part may ignite a war between the Yakuza clans. Samantha asks Jake for help, and eventually they learn that Polina has been sent to a yacht belonging to the Tozawa clan. Soon Polina's boyfriend contacts the protagonist and informs her that they can ransom the girl for a huge sum of money. Samantha takes almost all the money. She had to pay for her club, but Polina's boyfriend steals the money, leaving the protagonist with nothing. The girl has to borrow from the Shiharakai clan to open the club. This means that now she is completely tied up with the Yakuza and will not be able to get off the hook. Sato is put in charge of her business, but on the same night he is attacked and fatally wounded by a colleague he beat up earlier in the season. Tozawa learns that Jake has learned too much about his business and even starts questioning his lover. The Yakuza threatens her that he will kill her if she speaks out. He then flies to another country for treatment, as he has some serious illness. He also sends his men to Jake to scare him. They beat up the guy in his apartment, but do not kill him. Coming to his senses, the protagonist finds a videotape under the door. On it, we see Tozawa's men beating Polina to death because she fought back against one of the Yakuza clients. Jake goes to Category again, and they decide to continue the investigation together. This is the end of the first season. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and click the like button. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.